do this in the right order. It is being recorded now. I will share the PowerPoint. Tonight, we are going to be talking about queens, about queen excluders, about marking and clipping queens, about laying workers, drone laying queens, and how you get one of those. And you don't want one of those, so trust me on that one.
The headphones work, it's just that the bloody speaker, the microphone doesn't work.
Right, I am going to mute whoever that is. That's Graham. Where are you, Graham? No, apparently I can't mute Graham. Right, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and I've muted everyone. Sorry. So here we go. Queens. And the last bit will be signs of queenlessness and how you confirm this. So this photo is off Wiki Commons. And it's just quite a nice picture with lots of different pollens on. And we can all see the queen there, and she's got a white mark on, which helps identify her. I thought it was quite a nice picture, so I thought I'd include it. So why is the queen important? Well, she's the one who lays the eggs. She's the one who keeps the colony together. And we'll touch a bit more on that later on. But she's absolutely vital for your colony. If your colony doesn't have a queen, it will try and make one. And if it can't make one, then it's sort of doomed. But there's things you can do if you lose your queen. But we shall come on to that later on. So anyway, she's the female who lays eggs. She's not the only one who can lay eggs in there. Sometimes the workers can as well. But normally there is only the queen laying eggs in the colony. She lives for somewhere between 3 to 5 years. Some people change their queens every year, and nature happens to do it really well by encouraging bees to swarm. She's anatomically different to other females in the colony. She has great big ovaries. She has a spermatheca, and these are the bits that enable her to lay eggs. But her characteristics will lead the colony. If she's got grumpy genes, as we might like to call them, then the colony will be grumpy. There are other reasons a colony can become grumpy, but if you've got a nasty queen who makes nasty bees, then you need to get rid of her and bring in a different one. She mates early in her life and only leaves the colony to mate, and then when she swarms. So it's likely she'll leave the safety of her home only a couple of times in her lifetime. So Graham's raised a hand. Go on, Graham. You'll have to unmute.
First of all, I'm not muted.
No, I can hear you now. Go on.
Okay, just a quick question. You were talking about the queen's characteristics are imparted onto the bees. How much does the drones that she's mated with impart their influence or characteristics onto the brood?
They will impart different characteristics on the worker bees, and when she lays a new queen, the genetics of her and the drone she chooses to fertilize that egg out of the mixture in her spermatheca. I mean, she doesn't actually choose which drone it is, but the egg that gets fertilized is going to make the genetic material for the new queen that comes after her. But her parentage will be based on the same system, her mother's DNA and the DNA of the drones, or whichever drone it is that fertilizes the egg.
Right.
There's issues with something called a buckfast bee, and it's said the second generation buckfast bee is really nasty, and it's because a buckfast bee is a mongrel basically with a fancy name, and this is something a lot of
fast
people
books.
get excited about. It's a buck-fast bee. Well, it's just a posh mongrel, really, but it's been bred in a specific way for particular characteristics. And then when they reproduce, you're diluting those characteristics and bringing in other ones. But if you have a grumpy colony, you want to not let those drones go out into the wild, because they could be passing on that grumpiness.
Ah, right. So that's what I was getting at. If you have a fantastic queen and you've got a really calm, lovely colony, you can not wear gloves, you can go out in your underwear and they won't sting you. If those characteristics, is it like 50-50 from the queen and from the drones that mated with her, or are
her characteristics are her genetic heritage? They're nothing to do with the drones she mates with. The bees, assume she's got really good DNA parentage,
yeah,
and say there was one nasty grumpy drone in the mix, because she mates with about 15 to 18 drones. If one of those is a horrible one, a 15th or an 18th of the colony will have more tendency to be grumpy. But that would be
right. Okay.
We could talk about the genetics of queens another night.
Okay, all right, yeah. No, it's just that somebody, well, I don't know who it was, it might have been yourself, that says if you have a really fantastic queen, you should breed from her, you know, and make other queens.
Absolutely.
And my thoughts were, yes, but whoever she goes and mates with in the air,
yes,
is that going to affect whether you've got the same characteristics in your new colony?
It would, because if you can't control who she mates with, she might mate with Joe Blogg's grumpy bees down the road, and then all the daughters she potentially makes are horrible. Right. So there's a whole topic of bee genetics and bee breeding where you can control the parentage of bees, which isn't for tonight's talk at all.
Yes, the artificial insemination.
Yeah.
But
so
if you're going to cover this, no, if you're going to cover this at a later talk, I'll leave it till then.
Yes, fine. Please. Yeah. Right. So
okay,
queen.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll carry on.
Right. Queen excluders. When would you use a queen excluder? Would anyone like to come in and say when do you use a queen excluder?
If you've got supers on and you don't want them to.
That's it. When you've got supers on. Are there any other times?
To stop a swarm escaping, sconding.
Absolutely. It's a very naughty way of doing it, but it works. You can use a queen excluder. You can infer from what's just been said, under the brood nest to stop the queen escaping, or above it to stop her going up. There are some people who don't use queen excluders, and they just have a big column of bees that will go all the way up, and the brood rearing will go up in a big chimney, and it'll be quite a big colony because they'll have as much room as they want, as long as you keep putting supers on, to expand upwards. And that's actually what bees quite like doing. But the problem is you will have lots and lots of frames to look at if you want to find the queen. And I think that's actually the basis behind the rose hive. So if you fancy having very tall, thin hives and no queen excluders, you need to look about the rose hive. The spacing on a queen excluder will stop the queen's thorax getting through, and that's why it works. And anyone who says, oh, my queen got into my supers because my queen excluder's broken, has to see the queen excluder. The chances are it's intact, and 99% of the time it is actually user error. And it's usually because when you take the queen excluder off, you don't look under it. So then you pop it on the pile of supers next to you, and you've inadvertently popped her very safely into the supers, where she'll go and find room to lay. But there's a risk if that happens, you think your queen's too small and she's squeezed through this queen excluder. It's probably not happened like that. But it was designed originally by a Ukrainian guy many years ago, and the idea was it would restrain the queen. Now, it also works on drones, and that means if you're doing some manipulations where you end up putting a brood box above a queen excluder, the drones can get stuck in the queen excluder as they try and escape through the entrance. They have to squeeze through the queen excluder. And that's quite distressing for beekeepers who come to their colony again and find lots of dead drones stuck in the queen excluder. And more alarmingly, when you take the crown board off that brood box, lots and lots of very noisy boys all fly out at you and you wonder what's going on with your colony. And all it is you've shut the drones in and they quite like to go out for a bit of a fly about before coming back to eat honey. So there's lots of different sorts. And if you've got a plastic one that came with your hive kit, I suggest you buy a framed one because your beekeeping will be much more fun. You can get nice framed ones, you can get solid metal ones. I don't like the pressed ones very much, but they're, again, quite thin. They're less bendy and flippy than the plastic ones. And if you've got a plastic one, you will know when you try and take it off, it will peel up slowly. And then at some point it'll give way and it'll let rip and bees will fly in the air with it. And it's a bit of a nuisance. If you've got a framed one, it's much easier to slide your hive tool round and loosen it and take it off. I think they're just nicer to have because you don't have all that peeling off business with it. But they are dearer than the plastic ones. The zinc ones will discolour under certain circumstances. Don't flame a plastic one. If you need to sterilise your kit, don't put flames near the plastic. There's a couple of fancy names there that relate to different types, and we're not going to dwell on that. Just if you see them listed anywhere, go up and look and see what's different about them. But the framed one is the one I'd recommend you have. And I think it's a bit sad that lots of the big suppliers actually provide the plastic ones only. So come on to queen developments. They are the quickest of all the castes of bee. The workers take 21 days, the drones 24, but the queen only takes 16 days from the egg being laid to emerging as an adult. And I think that's pretty incredible. If you think about how long it is for a worker bee, that's 21 days. That's such a long time compared to 16 days. It's such a concentrated lifespan up until emergence of 16 days. They've got to pack so much work into building that queen. They must do something really special. And they do. They feed her this incredibly rich, very sugary food. And she has something like 1,500 visits to feed her compared to only a couple of hundred for a worker. She's fed this very rich food from the day the egg hatches, which is day 3, to the day it's capped at day 8. And that day 8 is the crucial one for all your beekeeping stuff. That's the date you need to remember. That day 8 is the really vital one for swarm control. So she has some pheromones that she makes, and these are made in the mandibular glands in her head. I'm not even going to try and pronounce those because I'll giggle myself silly trying to do that. But they keep finding more about these pheromones. And so if you go and look for some research, you'll find some really excellent stuff out there. She makes about 500 grams a day. Can't think how you say that.
Micrograms.
Micrograms is it? Thank you. It's a tiny amount, but it's distributed by her retinue. Now, I know this is the same picture as the one before, but I've now said the magic word retinue, and she has about 12 workers who follow her around and constantly groom her. They clean her, they feed her, they lick her, they keep her all shiny and new. And bear in mind, all the other bees go out for a poo. She stays in the hive. So any business she does is looked after by this retinue. But they absorb all these pheromones. And because bees feed each other, that pheromone gets spread throughout the entire colony. And that's what keeps the colony working together. There's some excellent research paper I'm going to link to afterwards for you all to go off and have a look and see how vital these pheromones are. But they get the bees working together. They encourage the colony to make comb. And when the colony swarms, if the queen's missing, they'll all come back home because it's the pheromones she gives off that keeps the swarm together, and they can go off then to make a new set of bees somewhere. But this retinue, you will occasionally see it really, really well as a full circle around her. And on here, there's 5 or 6 bees you might say are in her retinue, and they're all looking at her on this one side. So anyway, the queen lays eggs, and she normally starts in the middle of the frame. So if you've got a big empty blank drawn comb in your colony and you want to see if you've got eggs, look in the middle of that big empty comb, and the chances are they'll be there. And she'll lay further out as the day progresses. So the eggs in the middle will turn into larvae before the ones on the outside. So if you want to see eggs, look in the middle, see the bigger brood, and then run your eye to the edge of the frame until you can't see anything, and then have a proper squint, and you'll probably see eggs then. But it's a bit of a knack to seeing them. So where will the queen be? This is something we've done a whole session on of finding the queen. Quite often when you take a frame out, she'll be on the side looking at you or just underneath. But as you move it, she'll duck under the other side or crawl through a hole. So you'll spend ages looking for her, and she might actually be on the frame in your hand, but she's really good at just going from one side to the other. So to make her easier to find, we mark her. That's our main reason for marking her. But it also gives her a date, because if we use this colour code that we'll talk about in a minute, we will know how old she is. But you could use any colour you wanted. It's just we've adopted a standard over the years that helps other beekeepers know how old that queen is that arrived in their swarm. It allows you to know your queen is still in there. If you never mark your queens, then you don't know when they've been superseded. You'd have to take photos to colour match them because they can look quite different. You will want to get hold of your queen, but first of all you have to find her, and quite often finding her is much harder than getting a hold of her to actually mark her. There's a variety of things you can use to restrain her, but you will want to practice before you actually mark your queen. And what I'd say is have an extra colour with you, one that isn't this year's or even last year's colour, and use it to mark drones, and do it in whatever way you're planning on catching your queen, and mark about 10 drones in your hive each time you go in. And when you've done that for a few weeks, you'll feel quite confident about marking your queen, and then you know you've marked bees before. It's not that scary, and you'll make a much better job of it. And it also means if you make a really messy splodgy mark on a drone, it doesn't actually matter. And you will find if you do mark a lot of drones, you might have other beekeepers in the area chatting about it and saying, oh, I've got some drones with a green mark on this week. And then you'll know where your drones have ended up. And it's quite an interesting practice if you could convince your entire bee club to actually mark a set amount of drones in each apiary, and then make a note of whose drones turn up. And for that you might need to use 2 colours to identify your particular drones, but as we've all usually got a set of 5 colours, that would be fairly easy to organise, and it would actually be fascinating to see. So there are different ways of restraining her.
Pretty good food so far.
I can hear someone. Can you put your mute on, please, whoever that is with the radio on? I think it is. Right, so these queen colours. Will you raise good bees? Yes, we will all raise good bees. This indicates the colour order, which is white, yellow, red, green and blue. And the will you raise good bees is the easy way of remembering it. Of course, if you keep good notes, you'll have it written in your book what colour queen you've got in the hive you're looking at, and so you won't need to remember. But this is some things out of my hive kit that I went and fetched this afternoon to take a photo. I have one Posca pen, and it happens to be a red one. I have the little nail varnish type colours that needed quite a lot of shaking up actually, but they're quite pretty. I've got 3 different types of queen cage to pop a queen in, should I need to take one away. One of them needs a bit of wax or apple or something sticking in the end to stop her escaping. And normally it would be fondant. But if in the middle of summer you've got no fondant in your box, you have to improvise. And where my bees are, they're actually in a little orchard. And this year I needed to pop someone's queen in a cage for him. So we pressed the end of the pointy thing into an apple, and it broke off a nice little nugget of apple, which stopped the queen escaping. You will see my scissors for clipping queens. You will see my crown of thorns, which is in a piece of polystyrene, and you will see my one-handed queen catcher. The one-handed queen catcher is incredibly cheap if you buy it from China. If you buy it from one of the UK shops, you do pay a bit more, but you'll get it quicker. But as we're actually in December and you're not going to be using it, then it's probably well worth a punt getting it from China, because it'll save you a couple of quid, and it'll arrive in time for when you need it. The crown of thorns always needs putting back in its piece of polystyrene, because if you don't, you will stand on it, you will put your hand on it, and it will hurt because they are really, really sharp. I actually keep my scissors and my colour marking for that year and a queen cage in a glasses case within my kit, because then it fits into my pocket and I've not got scissors stabbing me in my pocket. So anyway, that's the colours. You could just pick one colour and only ever mark your queens one colour. That's entirely up to you. Lots of people don't clip their queens, and I think that's because they're frightened of it. But again, if you practice with drones until you're confident, and you can clip through the end of the one-handed queen cage catcher thing there, or you can actually pick her up and hold her. But I would recommend you practice that quite a lot before you do that on your queen. And as I've said before, don't do it too early in the season or too late for clipping, because if you damage her, then you've got to have a new queen. So you want it to, if you're going to damage her, do it at a time it'll be easy for the bees to replace her. So
can I ask you where you got those colours from, Diane?
They will probably be yours and mine favourite beekeeping supply shop, beginning with a T.
Okay.
Yeah, I did have a tin of Humbrol paint, because you can use Humbrol model paint, which comes in 1,000+ colours, I think. And unfortunately, I didn't put the lid back on that right, so I had to then clean all the paint out of my toolkit.
You can get the Posca pens off Amazon for next to nothing, can't you?
Yeah, the Posca pens I find are actually a bit messy. And what I do with that is I splodge a Posca pen on the side of the hive. I get a blade of grass and I make a nice sharp edge with that. I dip that into this little puddle of paint and then I mark the queen with that. And that way you get a really, really neat mark on her, and people are really impressed that it looks so neat. Whereas if you use the Posca pen tip itself, you can make a real smudgy mess.
Yeah, we've done that.
Can they clean the Posca pen off easier than
They
the Umbrel? Because they will try and clean it off, won't they?
They do try and clean it off, and you're supposed to let it dry a little bit before you let her back into the hive, because the sooner you let her in, the wetter it is and the quicker they can lick it off. I have read about people using Tipp-Ex. I personally wouldn't do that.
You won't be able to see her.
Well, this is actually one of the problems with this awful pale yellow. I don't think I used it last time I was supposed to, because it's very pale, and to be honest, it looks like quite a lot of pollens. And if you've got a white queen and you've got lots of balsam coming in, you get quite excited quite a lot when you're looking in your hive at the end of August. But the brighter colours are much more obvious until you've seen pollens that colour, and then you think, why am I using colours that look like pollen? But you can use whatever colour you want. So you have the whole gamut of Humbrol or Posca, who do an amazing range, I think. You could pick a beautiful purple or a sparkly silver or something.
Glitter.
I don't know about glitter. It's probably not good for the bees, is it, putting plastic in? So anyway, as I said, practice on drones and workers. Practice on workers if you're very brave picking them up. I would catch them in a cage if you're going to do that, but they will wriggle out really, really quickly because they're much smaller than the queen, so the cage doesn't stop her. But you should be able to pick a drone up in your fingers and get confident doing that, because there will be times in your beekeeping life you think, oh, there's the queen, I need to pick her up. And if you take 20 minutes to go and get your toolbox and find a container to put her in to put over her, then by then she's on a different frame. So get good at picking drones up, and then you'll have confidence when you come to pick the queen up.
Where do you pick them up by, Diane? Sorry to interrupt. Do you grab them by the bum end, their abdomen?
Or you never ever the abdomen. In theory, you can catch the wings, or you could try and pick her up by the thorax, but you really don't want to touch the important bit of her, which is the bit where the ovaries are. I think to start with, it's much easier if you pick some drones up, because then you'll get an idea of how hard the thorax is and how tough the wings are. And whilst they wriggle a lot, they don't rip the wings out. So I'd experiment picking drones up, and if you want to be picking queens up, I'd get very confident with drones. And then in the meantime, if you see your queens, put her in a crown of thorns and mark her that way, just so you can see her. Only mark the thorax, don't mark the wings, the abdomen, the head, the eyes, anything important. They don't die if you do that. And it's not good for them, I don't think, but the other bees might think there's something wrong with her if she's got paint all over her eyes, and they might decide to get rid of her. So we don't want to do that. But practice on drones, and I can't emphasize that enough. Practice. Try and get the paint dry before you put her back in. Some people get very nervous having the queen held under the crown of thorns. That's fine. You can lift it up. You can set that frame horizontally above the hive and lift the crown of thorns up so she can walk round. Somebody I know took a photo of their queen while she was squashed right down under the crown of thorns after she'd been marked. And for some reason, that queen died fairly soon afterwards. And I suspect it was because in the time it took to get a phone out, to get it on, to get it set on the camera, that queen was just being squashed too much. So be very careful with your queen, because she is very, very important. And if you're going to clip wings, get really sharp scissors, and again, practice on the drones. Clipping queens. There is a video on YouTube of a queen being clipped, and I've heard discussions from a master beekeeper who thinks it's clipped too near the where the wing comes out of the abdomen, of the thorax, sorry. And so I've not shared that video. I will try and find a better one, but that was the first couple of clips that came up was this one that somebody's told me. It's done too far down. Now, the problem with not clipping enough is that queen can still fly. She'll just fly in funny circles. So you have to get it right. So why do beekeepers clip queens? It stops your swarm going and sitting in a tree and then flying away. Because if the bees come out with a clipped queen, they will go and sit in the tree. And then after about 10 minutes, they'll go, where's the queen? And the chances are they're just going to go home. They're going to go back to the hive because they think, well, she must be in there. We must have left her there. Whereas in reality, she'll be about a metre or so away from the hive. I've gone down to the apiary on our allotment and found the queen just under the gate. And I nearly trod on her, but I spotted a couple of other bees, and I thought, well, that's odd. There are bees on the floor. What's going on? And I picked her up. I put her over by a nuke, and the swarm, when it came back, it found her. So we actually caught a swarm by picking the queen up, which is probably not going to happen very often. It means you can inspect less often, but I would say if you are a hobbyist beekeeper, you probably actually want to keep inspecting every week just for the sheer pleasure of inspecting your bees. And you get hold of her and you make sure you don't cut her legs off, because what she's likely to do while you're holding her to clip her is to put her leg up in the air, and then you accidentally cut that off, and then the bees will replace her because you've wounded her. So you want to be very careful. And as I said, not too near the beginning of the season and not too near the end. Your ideal time is while the colony is still small enough to make finding her easy. Because if in the middle of June you've got a massive colony, it's going to take you quite a long time to find her. And that will already probably be too late for doing your swarm control. So you want it done in time for swarm control, because most of the methods require you to find the queen. And that being able to find her when you want to do something with your colony makes your life so much easier. So they make her from a normal fertilized egg, and the egg's laid in a cup, and it might be in a play cup, it might be halfway up a cell, it might be on the side of a frame. But after 3 days, that larvae will hatch and the bees will decide they want to feed it massively. So it's fed for 5 days until day 8 when it's capped, and it will be swimming in royal jelly. And quite often you struggle to see the larvae in this huge puddle of royal jelly. She will get, as a larvae, 1,600 visits from workers to feed her, compared to 150 visits for just a normal worker. So that just goes to show what a massive fuss they make of them, and how the bees can condense all that down into 16 days. That's how the development goes. So the cells hang downwards, and that these on the bottom are sometimes referred to as swarm cells, but I would call any queen cell potentially a swarm cell. If there's only 1, 2, or maybe 3 in a colony, then it's probably supersedure, which is not when they're going to leave the colony and set up a new nest, but you never know. So you want to be careful with the queen cell you want to keep. So that one hanging further down the bottom, you might accidentally bang that when you put that back in the hive. So if you have to make a decision about keeping a queen cell, keep one in a position you're not going to accidentally knock it when you're putting the frame back in. And be really careful with that frame as well. So there'll still be some food when it's sealed on day 8, but the pupal development is really different. There's lots and lots of changes that have to happen to get all these special organs really well developed. Go on, there's 2 people have raised hands, Eddie and Graham. Go on, we'll have Eddie first. You'll have to unmute. No? What about you, Graham?
Okay, I was going to ask, if you see these cells and you say they're more likely to be supersedure cells, and you've found your queen and you've had a really, really good look at her, and you can't find anything wrong with her, and she may just be, say, a year old, would you, if she's a good queen, would you let them do what they want to do, or would you maybe destroy them, wanting to keep your original queen?
If I was very confident they were supersedure cells, I would close the hive up and let them get on with it. I wouldn't even look for the queen if there was just 1 or 2. The problem most new beekeepers and even some more experienced beekeepers find is they say, oh, there's only 2 queen cells on that, it's supersedure, shut the hive up, don't think about it. And actually there's about 30 in that entire hive, and it's because people don't smoke all the bees off or shake all the bees off all the frames to be able to see what's actually going on. And the bees are really, really good at hiding queen cells. So if there's a bit of comb they've chewed away and there's a hollow bit somewhere, there'll be a queen cell in it. If they've made edges at the side so they can crawl through, there can be a queen cell in there. They will sit on top of a queen cell and try to look innocent, but you'll know there's an extraordinary number of bees there, and you have to think it's like toddlers. They're being very quiet in the corner. What are they doing? So you do have to look at the frames properly, but I wouldn't ever interfere with a supersedure. I had one hive the other year that had my green mark queen, a new queen that was unmarked, and queen cells, because obviously the bees weren't happy, and so I shut them up, left them to it, came back, and it was the green queen still when I went back in.
depending on the time of year, wouldn't it be a good idea to put the queen in a nuke, or take her away for a bit as an insurance policy?
You can, but what that then tends to do is the bees have lost their queen pheromone, and so then they switch from supersedure, which they were quite happy with, to making lots and lots of queen cells. So if you were going to take the queen out in a nuke, you would want to do secondary swarm checks on that colony and make sure you left only one queen cell. And if she was the most beautiful queen in the world and laid really good bees, you might actually want to take the queen cells and put them with other sets of bees and get lots of nukes made up. There
Again,
are lots
depending on the time of year.
Yeah, obviously not late in the year. You'd want to do it reasonably early. But she would be a prolific queen if you thought she was really good. That is generally considered a good thing, that she will have made lots and lots of bees already. If you have a queen that you think's good but doesn't fill a brood box, then you've either got brood boxes the size of a car, or your queen's not actually very good. And one of the key indicators for knowing if your bees are any good is to go and look at other people's bees. If the only bees you've ever seen are yours, you might think yours are beautifully gentle. It is only when you go and see bees that are sort of sunbathing and lazing around in deck chairs that you realise there is such a difference between your lovely bees and really lovely bees. So if you ever get the chance to go and see another beekeeper's bees, don't forget clean bee suit and clean boots and clean gloves, but go and look at other people's bees, because that will give you so much more experience. You'll get so much from it. But yes, if you're not sure it's supersedure, then there are things you can take, but that's not desperately for this talk tonight. So when she's come out, she will normally eat away a tiny flap that will quite often be on a little hinge, and so that will open and she will emerge from the queen cell. And if you get to see that happen, you're very lucky. I've seen it happen a few times. I've seen it happen because I've pulled the end off a queen cell and the queen's come out. Quite often, if you find one queen cell and you do that, and there's a queen come out of that one, open all of them is your best option at that stage. But sometimes if this flap's very intact, then that will actually get put back on, and you'll think that queen cell hasn't hatched yet, because the bees are very cheeky and they'll reseal it, and you'll get quite confused as to why there's nothing in it. So this process from the egg being laid to emerging takes 16 days. That's such a tiny amount of development time, really. So anyway, we're going to do something a little interactive now. So I will switch to that one and share that one. So for this, you can all unmute and you can join in if you want. We are going to consider 5 possibilities, and some of these you might not know, but we will hopefully have some people who are happy to make guesses. We're going to look at the egg pattern and the brood pattern. So for the top row, multiple eggs at the bottom of some cells. So that doesn't sound right.
Laying worker.
New queen.
It could quite easily be a new queen, yes. There might be nothing capped, in which case you have to leave it a few days to see how it's capped. Or it might be normal cappings. And if it's normal cappings, it is your new queen just getting into the throw of things. So the next one, multiple eggs on the side. Yeah, and we've got the domed cappings.
It's the random pattern that makes it a worker, whereas a queen would be a regular pattern.
She would, yes. So a single egg at the bottom of the cell with a regular pattern and flat cappings.
That's queen right.
It is queen right, yeah. So a single egg at the bottom of the cell, regular pattern, flat brood.
Workers.
I'm Jasmine Sayers, and my skin is
Flat
complicated
brood.
my only red.
No,
Regular pattern, flat brood.
yeah, flat even brood.
Queen right.
Queen right again,
No, it's queen.
because I'm trying to catch you out. So
Flat brood, flat capping. That's
yeah,
same thing. Good.
yeah.
Whoever's got the telly on in the background, could you turn the telly off? Because I was.
It is a bit of
struck by
annoying.
it.
There's some at jingling, yeah. So anyway, multiple eggs on the side of cell and a regular pattern, domed cappings.
It's drones, but regular is a queen, so it's drone laying queen.
There's
laying
something
worker.
really wrong. It's
Yeah.
potentially
Laying worker.
a laying worker,
Laying worker.
but with a regular pattern,
Queenless.
That means that it's usually the queen doing that.
there might be a
Laying
queen. So it might be you've got laying workers that aren't being suppressed. So if you have no eggs and there is no capped brood,
Queenless.
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 Panic.
or
Or new queen.
a very young queen who just hasn't come into lay yet. So that just gives you some of the options you might see.
Or an
when
old
you-
queen is at a rest.
Yeah, or you're
In the
right
autumn,
there.
they do that, don't they? There's
They-
a lot of that this autumn.
They certainly can.
My old queen's having a rest now. Watch it, telly.
But anyway, that's
Very good.
that bit. If you look very closely at this frame, what can you tell me about it? Tell me all sorts of things about this frame.
Drones in the
Drone in the
middle.
middle.
There is
Irregular
well
pattern.
spotted. How much honey is on this frame? How much stores?
None.
Not a lot.
Sure.
Virtually none. What's
Top
the other
right-hand
problem
corner.
with this frame?
Pepper pot.
It's a little bit spotty, isn't it? It's not the
spotty.
best pattern in the world. And pepper potting is the name for it. The other thing to note is the bees have built a stupid big lump of comb at the top. And if you don't take that off, they will expand on that. And then the bit behind there, between the bit underneath, they will build queen cells.
There's
So
a load
you-
of larvae in there too, isn't there?
There's what?
It looks like a bit of brace comb, whatever it is. It looks like a load of larvae in there as well.
I suspect it's only honey, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing to watch for. And when you take brace comb off, always apply some smoke. And for those of you who go, I never use smoke, this is a time you want to use some smoke, because you do not want your queen under your hive tool, under the bit you can't see. So get all the bees out. Don't accidentally mash her up with your hive tool. But those little drone spots in the middle, if you see that, it might be a new queen getting on with it, just getting into the pattern of it. It might be she's starting to age. And if you spot it that early, then put a question mark on your notes. If you drone in the middle, and then next time when you go in that hive, you can say, well, actually, there's quite a lot this time. And before you get to the point where your colony's ruining comb, you can deal with it and you can replace the queen. So it's really important to look out for just little tiny bits of bobbly stuff like that.
And is that
write it
permanently
down.
marred? Sorry.
Say that again, Lorraine.
Is it permanently broken if she does put the drone in the middle? Does that
If she gets
forever make
worse
that drone
and if she
cell?
makes more and more drones, it usually means
Requeen
she's
it.
run out of sperm in the spermatheca. And
I mean for the frame's sake though, like will
no, they will quite often rebuild it. And if you're concerned about a sheet that's got quite a lot of bobbly drone on, which we'll come on to some examples later, some of it you might want to just melt down because it's old comb anyway, but some of it you can just scratch a bit and disturb it enough to make the bees rebuild it. And they should, with a good queen, build it as worker comb.
Okay.
They do put more stores in drone brood though, but in the brood nest, they're more likely to put drones in it. And we don't really want that in our colony. We want them to limit the number of drones they really make. So queenlessness. If you've got no eggs in your hive and no brood, lots of people go, I haven't got a queen. Oh my goodness. And the thing, if someone asks you this, is to say, when you last inspected, what was in there? And then they might say, oh, well, I did a swarm control and that was 2 weeks ago and I've still got no queen. It's actually 29 days, I think, for the average queen to start laying after swarm control's been done. So that's actually a lot longer than people usually want it to take. So to verify a colony's queenless, the best thing to do is not order a new queen, because you're wasting potentially 30 or 40 quid, because by the time that queen arrives, they'll be brood in your colony. So you get a frame of eggs, either from another hive in your apiary, or you beg, borrow, do not steal a frame from another beekeeper. But that brings with it the inherent risk of bringing disease into your apiary. So without being rude to people, say, are you sure this is a good frame of eggs? There's no disease in your colonies. And people might go, oh no, I'm fine. I've had the bee inspector out last year and blah blah. I know my diseases, and I know there's nothing wrong with it. But always write down on your notes where you got that comb from, because then if something does crop up, you can trace it back to whatever, and it helps disease prevention. But you put this frame of eggs in, and fairly quickly they will go, oh, we can make a new queen, and they will get on and make a queen cell. And you can either then buy a new queen, knock all the queen cells down and insert a new queen, or you can let them make a queen. Why might your colony become queenless? Would anyone like to have a guess?
You might have killed her in the last inspection.
Absolutely. You may have done something really, really stupid, like made a new cup and put the queen in, and you know the queen's in the nuke, and you flop that piece of perspex across the top of the frames, and you're not really looking. Then you put the lid on, you put a hive strap around it, you come back next week, and there's your queen on that bit of polystyrene between where the frames sit and the feeder. And having done that, I am a lot more careful with nukes now than I was the first time I used one. It was the very first time I'd used a nuke, and I was absolutely gutted the next week to find my beautiful yellow marked queen was flat as a pancake. So it's quite easy to do. There is a huge amount of user error in beekeeping, with beekeepers doing stupid things like accidentally cutting the head off when they meant to cut a bit of wing off. Just accidentally knocking her on a frame, doing it something even more stupid, dropping her away from the hive. And sometimes this happens because someone is watching you and you go, oh, I'll show you the queen, and you walk over to them with a frame with the queen on, and she falls off on the way. And they're quite hard to see on the ground. So you want to avoid dropping them, by the way. It's a very good hint that hold your frames over the colony. If people want to come and see your queen, they have to come to you. Don't carry the queen round. So if you discover your colony's queenless because they are making queen cells, then you do have the option of getting a queen in, but buy a local queen, or ask in your local bee club. And if you've got a good bee club, they will hopefully have someone who breeds nice, calm queens, and you can get one off them.
Is there any, because I know you've said about bees coming from the south up to the north before they'd struggle a bit, but would it be the same way going north to south, or would they kind of be like, hey, holiday, I'm going to have a great time?
Bees coming down.
Yeah,
I know,
this is it.
I know Lorraine might have some good bees.
Yeah, we should export autumn bees because they fly in ridiculously damp, cold weather. And that's how I know whether I need 2 coats on. If my bees aren't flying, I need 2 coats on. But yeah, I should imagine buy local.
North to south might be better than.
Yeah, it might be better, but I don't know anyone who's done that. I do know a beekeeper who's moved from different bits of the country, but he's not said about how his northern bees fared moving down south. So that might be a question next time I see him, which hopefully
they're dead slow and lazy.
Well, that's it.
It's just too hot. It's just too hot.
Yeah,
Can somebody get me water?
Yeah.
The guy got my first set of bees off. He did a year where he was taking them down to Kent on the orchards, and he said they just did nothing. Bad, didn't it?
Wow. They might not have liked the journey. They might have thought we haven't got deck chairs. The guy I know who picked up a swarm of yellow Italian bees, they were beautiful. They looked like they got light bulbs in, but all they did was turn food into bees. They didn't put a lid on any honey at all. So out of context, in an Oldham weather situation, those bees do really badly because they just don't think about rainy days, and we've got a lot of them in Oldham.
Well, that's a worry. I'm moving up from nice sunny Norfolk to Sheffield in 2.5 years' time.
Oh, right. I'd leave your southern bees behind and get some good.
I might have to re-queen with a batch of Sheffield
Yes.
queens before I come up here.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people around here to help out with some new queens.
Yeah. So anyway, laying workers, a laying colony, a laying worker happens because there is no brood pheromone, which gives you a clue how you can possibly resolve the problem. You can't just put a new queen in with laying workers because they think they've got a queen. It might be a bit of a rubbish queen who's only laying drones and very weak pheromone. And there can be, it's said, up to 50 laying workers in a colony. So it wouldn't be a case of picking out the laying worker. There might be lots in the hive. But to resolve it, you can either shake them all out, which is a bit brutal, but is the quickest, most effective way of doing it. And you take the hive away, you take the stand away, and you shake them out late in the evening near other bees, and they will beg the way into a new home. And even if the laying workers go into a hive with a queen, they'll either kill her because she smells a bit wrong, or she'll just crack on and do worker duties because there's a proper queen pheromone in the colony. So you can add sheets of open brood, but you would have to keep doing that on quite a regular basis. And in theory, sooner or later, the bees will go, my God, we haven't got a queen, we'll make one. But the problem with the length of time it can take is by the time you've noticed you've got no laying workers, that's because you've got laying workers. That's happened at least 3 weeks after you last had an egg, because otherwise there would be brood in there. So your colony is getting older and weaker because all the workers who go out and actually do useful things are getting older. So it might be hopelessly queenless, and shaking them out is actually the most efficient thing. A queen can lay just drone eggs as she reaches the end of her life, and whether it's the end of her life because you squash her is down to you, but she will lay eggs when she runs out of sperm, and poorly mated queens will run out quicker than well mated queens. And laying workers develop because there's no queen pheromones and no brood pheromones. So it is the brood pheromone that stops you getting laying workers. And that's why it's one of the ways of potentially solving it. But generally, you want to solve it more quickly. And that involves sadly shaking it out. But the longer it goes on, potentially the more risk to comb you get, with damage being done as they're all making the drone brood, and it ruins the comb.
I read somewhere that that the colony can detect that they are queenless within 30 minutes.
It is a ridiculously short time. They are very efficient. This is because they feed each other constantly, and the hive has one smell because of the way they work in the colony. They constantly feed each other. If there's no queen, instantly there's a stop in the queen pheromone, and that will get transmitted fairly quickly.
Yeah, I had a drone laying queen in the summer, and we squashed it, and within seconds you could see bees running from one hive across the apiary to another hive, as if they knew the queen had gone and they were just going to the next hive where there was one. So It was literally within a minute, you could just see this trail of people saying, oh, I'm off, there's a new queen somewhere else. Yeah, I don't even think it's 30 minutes. I think it was 30 seconds and they were noticed she'd gone.
This picture is laying workers, and they do look like someone sprinkled rice in some funny dishes. But it is actually eggs, and that's not a good sign at all.
Do they develop, Diane? Do they just turn into drones? Or fight?
Or does one win? Or do they?
No, they
like small ones have come up in that middle kind of lower.
Quite often, there is one larvae there, but there's some larvae at the side. Quite often, the bees will eat eggs that are laid in the wrong place. So the worker bees that aren't busy laying eggs might actually go and tidy this up. I don't know whether what ratio will actually end up
Survive.
hatching. But those that do will be boys and will be fairly useless.
Yeah, we always are.
I shouldn't say that, should I? Anyway, drone
thought I'd
laying
get it in.
queens.
Is this a frequent problem?
If you listen to some people, it has got worse over the last few years, and some of it might be, if you remember when we've talked about Varroa integrated pest management, and we've talked about putting frames in for the bees to make drone brood on the bottom half, and then we cut it out and get rid of it. We're potentially reducing the stock of drones that are there to go out and mate. And so some of the things beekeepers do reduce the drone numbers, and the fewer drones there are potentially impacts on how good the queens will be. And it's why if you've got a really good colony, you should probably not do sacrificial drone brood in that one, but let those genes go out and get shared. So there's a couple of other things we do drone uncapping to measure Varroa count, and obviously that does for the drones as well. So anything that interferes with the drone population will impact on well mated queens, and there are some people quite concerned about that, as well as how pesticides affect queens' ability to breed and store sperm long term. If they're full of pesticides and things, that's not very good for humans, so I can't imagine it's very good for bees either. So anyway, drone laying queens, these happen because she has run out of sperm. So she has no more to give, but that will be clued up in the weeks beforehand as she lays some in the middle and an increasing amount of drone brood. This picture's a really bad case that's obviously been going on for some time, and there's nothing worth saving there. And this one is what you might notice a few weeks after the just scattered drone brood on the picture earlier. These pictures are from the MBU. There's loads of pictures there you can go and look through. But these just illustrate drone brood from a laying worker, or even a laying queen. It's not a bad pattern compared to having one bit in the top left corner and one bit in the top right corner. But you will recognise the drone brood as being a problem, and it almost doesn't matter what the problem is, what's the cause of it, because you've got to deal with it, and deal with it before you get your combs looking like that, because at that point that you may as well melt them down, I think. So where should you get new queens from? Go on.
The hive next door.
The hive next door, your best hive in your apiary or your club apiary.
Your best hive's the one that's still got a good queen in it.
Yeah.
As local as possible.
As local as possible. So don't buy fancy queens from the other end of the country, and especially don't buy them at the beginning of the year, because they will be imported. And we don't need imported queens. We've got lots of good beekeepers in this country who should be making bees for other beekeepers.
I absolutely got a queen in September when I killed a queen by accident using the max.
Yeah.
And I got mine from Fife, so it's like an East Coaster.
Yeah.
But it was the last one I could find, and I decided to take a punt.
Yes, it's
must.
Yeah. So anyway, what do you do with the old queen? You can do the thing I call the thumb test if you want, and that basically involves you take the queen and you press her against a branch or stem of a tree in your apiary, and you press her until she fails the thumb test, because you're squashing her to death. And
I've
that's
got a mate who introduces it to the hive tool.
Yes, that's another thing you can do. Or if you go out and do lots of talks, what you do is you build up a collection of dead bees, and you can take them out with you. The kids will absolutely love them, and the kids will ask really terrible questions like, what did you use to kill them? And then you're faced with a room full of rainbow brownies that are about 5 or 6, I think, wondering how much detail you give them on what chemical you used. So instead I chose to say they all died of natural causes, and my queens do actually. I put them in the freezer normally. But I've got queen bees there. I've got a drone, a queen and a worker at the top, not necessarily in that order. I've got a selection of wasps and I've got some bumblebees. Now, all the bumblebees have been found dead on the ground or in my greenhouse. And I've got another 5 or 6 to come out of the greenhouse that managed to find their way in there and died against the window. They fade a little bit in the sun, but they're very dry. They should have probably been pinned a while ago. But this is just in a box to take out when I go and do talks to kids, because kids love dead things in a box.
My nephew
So
would love them.
you can just squash them if you want, or you can pickle them in alcohol and keep them in a jar. And I've got about 6 in a jar in my bee room as well. And there are ones very squashed around the apiary as well. There is one theory: you can squash the queens where you want your swarms to land. And if you try that and it works, that's absolutely excellent.
PhD
in there somewhere, isn't it?
It's what, sorry?
There's a PhD in there somewhere.
Yes.
Taking queens and squashing against various places to see if the swarms go to it.
Yeah. Right.
I've been told that if you squash her and put her in propyl alcohol in a test tube, give it a good shake, and put a couple of drops inside a swarm catcher, the queen's pheromone is still in there, and that will attract them.
You can, but I find propolis dissolved in isopropyl and then painted on the inside of the box works like a charm. My recommended reading is, there's some websites that I will link to later, but I'm a particular fan of Winston, The Biology of the Honeybee, and it is absolutely fabulous. And if you want to know more about queens, then it's probably the best book to get. It'll cost you a few quid, but it is absolutely great. And as Christmas is coming up, if you haven't got anything on your Christmas wish list, then get that put on. So are there any questions? I am going to stop recording in 5 minutes. So the first 5 minutes of questions will be recorded, and then I'll turn it off and we'll have a bit of a chat before we all go home and find other things to do.
And I just want to say,
Have you got a question, Jan?
Yes, I've got a question.
Go on.
As you know, I'm a little bit worried about my colony because they're throwing out drone larvae like there's no tomorrow. I haven't found a warm enough day yet, so I've been watching those pictures of the drone brood, drone brood, with interest. Yeah, to see what I'm looking for. I'm dreading having to shake them out because it's my biggest colony. So it's been really helpful, this talk, but I am a bit concerned about the queen. Do I squish her?
Surely at this time of the year, there's nothing you can do anyway. You can't replace her, so you just got to cross your fingers.
But if you have got a drone layer now, and because of what's going on with Jan's hive, we suspect there might be, but there might not be. If there was a warm day, you can go and have a look. And if you think there is, you can shake them out, find the queen, shake them out, deal with it. And then you don't waste more comb, because the risk is that that picture of the really rotten comb being all jaggy shapes, that's what quite a lot of it will end up like if you leave it till March perhaps. But if it's too cold, then you do risk doing damage to the colony. So we're in a quandary like this. Should she just go in and do it? And I dare on the side of leaving it, because I wouldn't want to sting at this time of year, because they'll be packed with venom unless they're already all drones.
If it's cold for the next month or so, they won't potentially be laying anyway, will they? So,
well,
this is it. Waiting.
If it's a very big colony of worker bees and there's worker bees going laying, then there might well be. And one of my thoughts was, because it's such a big colony, when it's clustered, it's got a bit colder, so it's clustered a bit more. And the brood that was on the edge might well have been drone brood, because we're only looking at it from a photo, aren't we? We're not analysing it under a microscope to check it is drone brood. It looks fairly drony. But if the colony's clustered a bit more, then any drone brood it was making at the edge will get sacrificed and they'll clean it out. So it might be perfectly normal in the middle, where the cluster is still.
Yeah.
Or it's just really difficult without knowing. If you know someone with an endoscope and you fancied piping that down into the top of the colony, that might work.
Oh, right.
If you've got a fancy one on a camera, a phone.
Oh, right. Yeah, I see what you mean.
List to see what turns up.
Yeah.
I would like an endoscope.
See, the problem is, in my house, we have one because we really like gadgets. The minute there's a gadget somewhere, I don't know who's got the TV on, and it's not showing up on my screen.
It's not me.
Oh, it might have been Jan. Sorry, Jan. Are you sharing the lounge with someone who wants the telly on? Yeah, that's why I'm up in my office, because otherwise I'd be competing with whatever he's watching on his laptop, actually. There's a SpaceX launch possibly going ahead again. And we watched that, the countdown yesterday. Very disappointing. Anyway, can't really help you, Jan, but if there was a nice day coming up, I'd get in and have a really quick look. I will stop recording.